On the third day, Kehoe made a breakthrough with the ship's main computer system. He had been working inside the vessel for hours trying to understand the crystal circuits that powered everything. The technology was unlike anything humans had developed. But his years of experience with machines helped him see the patterns. When he connected two damaged power conduits, the entire ship suddenly came alive. Lights blazed throughout the interior and screens began displaying information in the alien language. A voice started speaking from hidden speakers throughout the vessel. Nara, who had been watching him work, suddenly gasped and ran to the main control panel. She placed her hand on a scanner and spoke rapidly in her own language. The computer voice changed, becoming more respectful and formal. Kehoe could not understand the words, but he could hear the difference in tone. The children came running into the ship when they heard the sounds. The little girl clapped her hands and shouted something that sounded like celebration. The boy looked relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Nara turned to Kehoe with tears in her eyes. She spoke to the computer in her language, then gestured for him to come closer. A section of the control panel began glowing and new symbols appeared. These symbols were different from the others, simpler and somehow familiar. Then something amazing happened. The computer began speaking in broken but understandable human language. The words were mechanical and stilted, but Kehoe could finally understand what was being said. Greetings, human engineer, the voice said. Your repairs have restored basic translation functions. I am the shipboard intelligence of the royal vessel Starwind. This ship belongs to Princess Nara of the Altarian Empire. Kehoe stared at Nara in shock. Princess, she was royalty. That explains so much about her elegant bearing and the way she carried herself even when exhausted and hurt. She had been evaluating him, not as a refugee judging a stranger, but as a ruler deciding if he could be trusted. The computer continued speaking. Princess Nara fled from rebel forces who attacked the royal convoy. They seek to overthrow the Altarian government and eliminate the royal family. Prince Taemin, her husband, died defending the ship and the precious cargo. It Kehoe learned that the Altarian Empire was one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They controlled hundreds of star systems and commanded fleets of advanced warships. The rebellion against them had been growing for years, led by military commanders who wanted to seize power for themselves. Nara was not just any princess. She was next in line to become empress of the entire empire. The children, Bin and Hana, were the future of their civilization. The rebels knew that if they could capture or kill the royal family, their path to power would be clear. The ship they had escaped in was not just a transport. It carried the Imperial command codes that could control every Altarian warship in space. It also held the locations of secret bases and the identities of loyal commanders scattered across the galaxy. In the wrong hands, this information could destroy the Empire. Kehoe understood now why the pirates had been so determined to capture them. They were not random criminals, but rebel agents sent to hunt down the royal family. The attack had been carefully planned and executed. Only Prince Taemin's heroic sacrifice had allowed Nara and the children to escape, but their troubles were far from over. The rebels would not give up. They had ships and agents searching every system for the missing princess. Time was running out, and soon they would track the royal family. To Titan-7, Nara spoke to the computer again, and it translated her words. Human Kehoe has shown great kindness to us. He has fed us, sheltered us, and repaired our ship without asking for payment. His skills as an engineer are remarkable, and his character is pure. He is worthy of our trust. The computer processed this information and responded, Princess, your judgment is noted. Kehoe has demonstrated the qualities that the Altarian Empire values in its allies: compassion, skill, integrity, and courage. These traits are rare in the galaxy. Kehoe felt overwhelmed by what he was learning. A princess had crashed into his backyard. He had been eating dinner with alien royalty and tucking future emperors into bed. The responsibility was staggering. These people were not just refugees, they were the key to peace in an entire galactic empire. The computer began showing him technical details about the ship, systems that could travel faster than light weapons, that could destroy entire fleets' energy sources, that never ran out. The technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had developed, but the most important revelation came when Nara spoke directly to Kehoe through the translator. She told him that the Altarian Empire had been watching human space for decades. They were impressed by human creativity and determination. Many alien species looked down on humans as primitive, but the Altarians saw potential. The Empire had been looking for a way to make contact with humanity without alarming them. They wanted to offer alliance and friendship, to share technology and knowledge. But first they needed to find humans who could be trusted with such advanced gifts. Nara explained that Kehoe had proven himself in ways that impressed even her. He had shown kindness to strangers without knowing who they were. He had used his skills to help others without expecting reward. Most importantly, he had treated alien children with the same care he would show human children. The rebels who were hunting them represented everything wrong with power. They wanted to rule through fear and violence. But Kehoe represented the best qualities that any species could have. He was exactly the kind of person the Altarian Empire wanted as an alliance. Kehoe worked to complete the ship's repairs. Nara made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She had been carrying the Imperial command codes, looking for someone worthy to help her restore peace to the galaxy. She had searched among her own people and found only corruption and fear, but this simple human mechanic on a forgotten mining colony had shown her what true leadership looked like. It was not about birth or wealth or power. It was about character and compassion. It was about doing the right thing even when it cost you everything. The computer finished uploading human language files and began speaking more naturally. Kehoe, your repairs are nearly complete. The ship will be ready to fly within hours, but Princess Nara has an important decision to make. She can return to Altarian space and continue running from the rebels, or she can take a different path. Nara looked at Kehoe with an expression he could not read. She seemed to be weighing options that he could not understand. The children sensed the tension and moved closer to their mother. They had learned to fear moments when adults made serious decisions. Kehoe continued working, not knowing that his life was about to change forever. He thought he was simply helping a family in need get back on their way, but Nara was planning something that would shake the foundations of galactic power. The princes of the Altarian Empire had found her champion. Kehoe had worked through the entire night to finish repairing the royal ship. His hands were cut and bleeding from handling the sharp crystal components. His back ached from crawling through tight maintenance spaces, but as dawn broke over Titan 7, the vessel was finally ready to fly again. Ship's engines hummed with perfect harmony. All systems showed green on the control panels. The hull had sealed itself using some kind of self-repairing technology that Kehoe still did not understand. It was like the ship was alive and had healed from its wounds. Nara emerged from his workshop with Ben and Hannah. The children had slept peacefully, knowing their ship would soon take them away from this dangerous place. But Kehoe noticed that Nara looked troubled. She kept staring at the command crystal in her hand, the device that controlled the entire Altarian fleet. The ship computer announced that all repairs were complete and they could depart immediately. Nara should have been relieved, but instead she seemed more conflicted than ever. She spoke quietly to the computer in her own language, having a conversation that Kehoe could not follow. Ben and Hannah ran to Kehoe and hugged him tightly. They had grown to love this kind human who had saved their lives. The little girl Hannah had tears in her eyes. She did not want to leave the nice man who made them toys and shared his food. Kehoe knelt down to their level and smiled. Even though his heart was breaking, he had grown attached to these children. They reminded him of the family he had always wanted but never had. Saying goodbye to them felt like losing a part of himself. Through the translator, Nara thanked Kehoe for everything he had done. She told him that his kindness had saved not just their lives, but possibly the future of the entire Altarian Empire. She said his name would be remembered with honor in the royal history. Kehoe waved away her thanks. He said that any decent person would have done the same thing. Helping people in need was not heroic, it was just being human. Nara smiled sadly at this response. It confirmed everything she believed about his character. The computer announced that they should depart soon. Long-range sensors were detecting ships entering the system. Rebel forces were closing in on their location. Every minute they delayed increased the danger to everyone on Titan 7. But instead of boarding her ship, Nara did something that shocked Kehoe. She reached into a hidden compartment and pulled out an ornate crystal device. It was about the size of his fist, and it pulsed with inner light. The moment she touched it, the device began scanning Kehoe with beams of soft energy. "This is a royal command key," Nara said through the translator. It is one of only 5 in existence. Each one grants complete authority over a portion of the Altarian fleet. The holder becomes an admiral of the Empire, with power over thousands of ships, and millions of Leveskihos stared at the device in confusion. He did not understand why she was showing it to him. The crystal finished its scan and began glowing brighter. Various symbols appeared on its surface, recording information that meant nothing to him. Nara continued speaking. The Altarian Empire has been searching for decades for someone worthy to lead our expansion into human space. We need someone who understands both human and alien technology, someone with unshakable moral character, someone who can bridge the gap between our species. She pressed the command key into Kiho's hands, and he felt it warm to his touch. The device immediately bonded with his genetic signature, permanently linking him to the Altarian command structure. His name and image appeared on screens throughout the ship. As the new authorized user, I hereby name you Admiral Kiho of the Altarian Space Fleet and Imperial Engineer of the Empire. Nara said formally, "You have proven yourself through your actions, not your words. You showed compassion to strangers who could offer you nothing in return. You shared your last meal with hungry children. You worked without rest to help people you barely knew." Kiho tried to give the device back to her. This was impossible. He was just a mechanic from a mining colony. He did not know anything about commanding fleets or leading empires. He had never even been off Titan 7 except for a few trips to nearby stations. But Nara refused to take the command key back. She explained that the Altarian Empire was different from human governments. Leaders were chosen based on character and ability, not politics or wealth. The previous admiral had been corrupt and weak, allowing the rebellion to grow strong. The Empire needed someone pure of heart and brilliant of mind, someone who could inspire loyalty through example rather than fear. Kiho had demonstrated these qualities in the most basic way possible by helping a family in need. The ship computer confirmed the transfer of authority. Admiral Kiho had said, "Your authorization codes are now active. The Third Fleet of the Altarian Empire awaits your commands. 47 battleships, 600 support vessels, and 50,000 crew members are under your direct control." Kiho felt dizzy with the magnitude of what was happening to him. This was just a crystal in his hand, but to the Altarian Empire, it represented ultimate military authority. He commanded more firepower than most planetary governments could dream of. Nara showed him how to activate the command key. A holographic display appeared showing the locations of every ship in his fleet. They were scattered across dozens of star systems, but all were ready to obey his orders instantly. The responsibility was overwhelming. "You must understand," Nara said, "that this is not just about military power. The Altarian Empire has technology that could solve human problems: hunger, disease, energy shortages, space travel. We want to share these gifts with your species, but only through someone we trust completely." She explained that previous attempts at first contact with other species had gone badly. Primitive civilizations often became dependent or hostile. When given advanced technology, the Altarians had learned to be very careful about who they chose as intermediate. Kiho represented everything they hoped to find in humanity. He was skilled enough to understand their technology, humble enough not to abuse power, and compassionate enough to use it wisely. The combination was extremely rare in any species. The children Bin and Hana did not fully understand what was happening, but they could see it was important. They stood close to Kiho, offering their support in the only way they knew how. Their presence reminded him why this mattered. Through the translator, Nara continued, "The rebels who killed my husband want to use our technology for conquest and control. They see other species as slaves to be dominated. You see them as friends to be helped. This is why you must lead our fleet against them." Kiho looked at the command key in his hands, then at the family that had trusted him with their lives. In just a few days, his world had completely changed. He had gone from a struggling mechanic to the commander of an alien battle fleet, but the most amazing part was that it felt right deep down. Kiho knew that this was what he was meant to do, not because of destiny or fate, but because someone needed help and he had the ability to provide it. Just like when he first saw Nara and her children stumbling from their crashed ship, the computer announced that rebel ships would arrive within hours. They had to make a decision: fight or flee, stand and face the enemy, or run to fight another day. But now the choice was not just Nara's to make. "Admiral Kiho, what are your orders?" the computer asked for. The first time in his life, Kiho held the power to change the galaxy. Kiho woke up early the next morning and quietly made coffee in his small kitchen. The alien family was still sleeping on his couch. The woman had her arms wrapped around both children like she was protecting them even in sleep. Her silver hair caught the morning light coming through his cracked window. He decided to let them rest and went down to his workshop to think about their situation. The crashed ship outside looked even more impressive in daylight. The blue metal hull reflected the sun in ways that hurt to look at. Directly strange writing covered every surface, and some of the symbols were still glowing despite the ship being powered. Don Quijote had worked on ships for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. The technology was so advanced it seemed like magic. Every line and curve of the hull served a purpose. Nothing was wasted or decorative. It was engineering perfection. He heard footsteps on the stairs and turned to see the woman coming down slowly. She looked much better after sleeping, but still weak and cautious. When she saw him, she pressed both hands to her chest and bowed her head. It was clearly some kind of thank you gesture. Quijote smiled and pointed to himself, saying his name slowly. The woman understood immediately. She pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Nara. Then she pointed upstairs toward the children and said 2 more names that Quijote tried to remember. They spent the next hour trying to communicate. Using gestures and simple drawings, Quijote gave Nara paper and pencils. She drew pictures that told a story of space travel and violence. Men with weapons attacking their ship, explosions and fire, a man who looked like he might be her husband falling. Down with his eyes, Quijote understood enough to know they had been attacked, and someone important to them was gone. He felt his heart break for this family who had lost so much. Nara wiped tears from her blue cheeks as she drew the pictures. Reliving painful memories, the children came downstairs, looking for their mother. The little girl ran to Nara and hugged her tightly. The boy stood back, watching Quijote carefully, trying to decide if this strange human was Sci-Fi. Quijote went to his tool box and pulled out some scrap metal and wire. He sat on the floor and started bending and twisting the materials. The children watched with growing interest as he shaped the metal into small figures, a man, a woman, and 2 children holding hands. He gave the metal family to the children, and their faces lit up with joy. The little girl hugged her metal figure and said something in their musical language. The boy smiled for the first time since Quijote had met him. It was a small gift, but it meant everything to them. Nara watched this simple act of kindness with amazement. She had traveled to many worlds and met countless species. Most beings would have demanded payment for helping strangers or turned them away completely, but this human had given them food, shelter, and now toys for her children without asking for anything in return. Quijote brought out his collection of pictures from Earth and showed them to the family. He pointed to green forests, blue oceans, and snow-covered mountains. Nara studied each image carefully. She seemed fascinated by the variety of landscapes on his home world. She pulled out a small device from her pocket that had survived the crash. It projected holographic images of her own world. Quijote gasped at the beauty of it. Cities that floated in the clouds, forests with trees that grew in spirals, lakes that glowed with bioluminescent light. Through more drawings and gestures, Nara explained that their ship had been traveling through this system when pirates attacked. They were not random criminals, but organized hunters looking for something specific. Her husband had died protecting a secret that the pirates wanted. Quijote could see the pain in her eyes when she drew the attack. The pirates had superior numbers and weapons, but her husband had fought bravely to give his family time to escape. She had piloted their damaged ship as far as she could before it finally gave out and crashed on Titan 7. The children did not fully understand what had happened. To their father, they kept asking questions in their language that made Nara cry. Quijote could not understand the words, but he recognized the universal sound of children asking where Daddy was. He decided to distract them by showing them his workshop. The boy was fascinated by all the tools and machines. Quijote let him hold a wrench and showed him how to tighten bolts. The little girl was more interested in the small motors and electronic parts. She had an intuitive understanding of how they worked. That surprised Quijote. As the day went on, Quijote noticed that Nara was watching him very carefully. She studied how he worked, how he treated her children, how he shared his limited food without complaint. She seemed to be evaluating him, judging his Character for reasons he did not understand. When afternoon came, Kehoe decided to examine their ship more closely. He gathered his tools and walked around the hull looking for access panels or maintenance hatches. Nara followed him, pointing out different sections and trying to explain their functions. She showed him where the engines were located and where the main computer systems could be found. The ship was incredibly complex, but Kehoe began to see patterns in the design. It was logical and efficient in ways that human engineering often was. Noe found a maintenance panel and carefully opened it. Inside was a maze of crystal circuits and flowing energy conduits. Nothing looked familiar, but somehow Kehoe could sense how the systems were supposed to work. It was like the ship was speaking to him in a language of pure engineering. Nara watched in amazement as Kehoe began making small repairs with his primitive human tools. He bypassed damaged circuits and rerouted power flows. The ship began to respond. Some of the interior lights came back on, and a few control panels started glowing. The children clapped their hands with excitement when they heard the ship's engines make a soft humming sound. It was the first sign of life the vessel had shown since crashing. Kehoe smiled at their joy, but he knew the repairs would take much longer. As evening came, Kehoe prepared another meal for his guests, using the last of his food supplies. He would have to find more tomorrow, but tonight his new friends would not go hungry. The children had grown comfortable with him, and the little girl even sat on his lap while they ate. Nara spoke to her children in their own language, and Kehoe could tell she was explaining who he was and why they were safe with him. The boy nodded seriously and said something that made Nara smile. It was the first time Kehoe had seen her truly happy since the crash. After dinner, Kehoe set up sleeping arrangements again. He gave the family his bedroom while he prepared to sleep on the workshop floor, but Nara would not allow it. She insisted through gestures that she and the children would sleep on the couch again. As they settled down for the night, Kehoe realized how much his life had changed in just one day. His quiet, lonely existence had been turned upside down by this mysterious family, but instead of feeling burdened, he felt more alive than he had in years. He looked out at the alien ship glowing softly in the darkness and wondered what tomorrow would bring. He had no idea that he was about to discover the true identity of his guests, or that his simple act of kindness would change the entire galaxy. Kehoe was under an old mining machine when the ground started shaking. He rolled out quickly and looked up at the sky. Something big and bright was falling fast toward his small repair shop. The sound was terrible, like metal screaming and engines dying. He ran outside and watched the huge ship crash into the empty lot behind his workshop. Dirt and rocks flew everywhere. The impact was so strong that all the windows in his shop cracked. His old tools fell off the shelves and scattered across the floor. Kehoe had lived on Titan 7 for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The ship was massive, much bigger than any human transport he had worked on. It was made of some kind of blue metal that seemed to glow from inside. Strange symbols covered its surface, and they pulsed with soft light. Even though the ship was clearly broken, steam rose from cracks in the hull and sparks shot out from damaged parts. The ship had carved a deep trench in the ground when it crashed. Small fires burned around the impact site, but they were already dying out in the thin atmosphere of the mining colony. Kehoe grabbed his emergency kit and ran toward the wreck. He had been a mechanic for 20 years, and his instincts told him to help. As he got closer, he could see that the ship was not built by humans. The design was too smooth, too elegant. Human ships looked like metal boxes, but this one looked like it was grown rather than built. He walked around the ship looking for any signs of life. Most of the hull seemed intact despite the crash. Whatever this blue metal was, it was incredibly strong. A human ship would have been completely destroyed by such an impact. Then he heard something that made his heart race. It was the sound of crying. Not just any crying, but the desperate sobs of children. Kehoe followed the sound to a section of the ship where a hatch was slightly open. Steam was pouring out of the gap. He called out hello, but got no response. The crying continued. Kehoe found a piece of metal pipe and carefully pried the hatch open wider. More steam rushed out along with air that smelled strange like flowers. And electricity mixed together. The first thing he saw was a hand. It was pale blue and reaching out desperately. Kehoe grabbed it and pulled. A woman emerged from the ship coughing and gasping. Her skin was light blue like winter sky and her hair was silver white. She was tall and thin with features that were almost human but not quite. She collapsed on the ground, breathing heavily. Kiho could see she was hurt. There was purple blood on her torn clothes and cuts on her arms. But she was not thinking about herself. She kept pointing back into the ship and saying words he could not understand. Kiho looked into the hatch and saw two small children huddled together in the smoky interior. They had the same blue skin and silver hair as the woman. The boy looked about 8 years old and the girl was younger, maybe 6. Both were crying and coughing from the smoke. He climbed into the ship and carefully lifted out the little girl first. She was so light it scared him. Her big eyes looked at him with fear and confusion. Kiho tried to smile to show her he was safe. Then he went back for the boy who clung to him tightly as he carried him out. The woman tried to stand but fell down again. Kiho could see she was very weak. All 3 of them looked like they had not eaten in days. Their clothes were expensive, looking but dirty and torn. The woman kept looking around frantically as if expecting someone to attack them. Kiho did not speak their language, but some things did not need words. These were people in trouble and they needed help. He pointed to his workshop and made gestures to show they should come with him. The woman looked uncertain, but when she saw her children were barely able to stand, she nodded. He helped the woman to her feet and picked up the little girl. The boy walked beside them, holding on to Kiho's shirt. It took several minutes to get them all to his workshop. Kiho lived in a small apartment above his repair shop. It was not much, but it was warm and safe. He settled them on his old couch and gave them water. They drank it like they had been thirsty for weeks. The woman said something that sounded like thank you in her musical language. Kiho nodded and went to his tiny kitchen to see what food he had. There was not much. Some dried meat, a few cans of vegetables, and half a loaf of bread. It was supposed to last him 3 days, but he brought it all out and gave it to his unexpected guests. The children ate quickly, but the woman made sure they had enough. Before she took any for herself, while they ate, Kiho looked out his window at the crashed ship. Even broken and smoking, it was beautiful. The metal still glowed softly and the symbols continued to pulse. He wondered where it came from and why it had crashed on his little mining colony. Titan 7 was not on any major space routes. Ships rarely came here except to pick up ore. The woman caught him looking and said something while pointing at the ship. Then she pointed at herself and the children. Kiho understood she was trying to tell him it was their ship. He nodded and pointed at himself, then at his workshop. He was trying to say he could fix things. Her eyes widened with hope. She took his hand and squeezed it gently. Even though they could not speak the same language, Kiho could see the gratitude in her expression. These people had been through something terrible, and somehow they had ended up at his door. Kiho looked at the children who were already falling asleep on his couch. The little girl was curled up like a cat, and the boy had his arm around her protectively. The woman was struggling to stay awake, watching over them. He brought them blankets and pillows. The woman tried to refuse, wanting her children to have them instead, but Kiho insisted. He made gestures to show they should all rest. Tomorrow he would look at their ship and see if he could fix it. As the strange family settled down to sleep in his small home, Kiho wondered what he had gotten himself into. But looking at the peaceful faces of the sleeping children, he knew he had done the right thing. Whatever trouble they were running from, whatever had brought them to his world, he would help them if he could. Outside, the alien ship continued to glow in the darkness like a fallen star waiting to rise again. Kiho stared at the command key in his hands for a long moment. The weight of command felt heavier than any tool he had ever held. But when he looked at Ben and Hannah watching him with trust in their young eyes, he knew what he had to do. Computer, he said clearly, activate emergency beacon, summon all available 3rd Fleet units to Titan 7 immediately. Set defensive perimeter and prepare for hostile contact. The response was instant. Yes, Admiral Kiho. Emergency protocols activated. Estimated arrival time for nearest battleships is 47 minutes. Long-range sensors show 12 rebel vessels approaching our position. Nara watched in amazement as Kiho transformed before her eyes. The uncertain mechanic was gone, replaced by a commander who understood what needed to be done. His voice carried authority that came not from birth or training, but from absolute conviction. Ho quickly assessed the situation. The rebel ships would arrive before his fleet could get into position he needed. To buy time and protect the civilians on Titan 7, the mining colony had no defenses and 3,000 innocent people who could be hurt if fighting broke out. He activated the ships' external communications and broadcast to the entire colony. This is Admiral Kehoe speaking. All residents must evacuate to the underground mining tunnels immediately. This is not a drill. Hostile forces are approaching and surface areas are not safe. The colonists knew Kehoe as the quiet mechanic who fixed their equipment. They were confused by his sudden claim to military rank, but something in his voice made them listen. Within minutes, families were gathering emergency supplies and heading for the deep shelters. Kehoe turned to Nara and her children. You must also go to the tunnels, he said. The rebels are coming for you. Specifically, if they capture you, the revolution will succeed. The people of Titan 7 will protect you until my ships arrive. But Nara shook her head. I am a princess of the Altarian Empire, she said proudly. I do not run from rebels. My place is here, fighting beside you. You gave us sanctuary when we needed it most. Now we stand together. The first Altarian battleship dropped out of hyperspace just as rebel vessels entered the outer system. It was a magnificent sight to behold. A kilometer-long ship covered in gleaming armor and bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The rebels immediately changed course to intercept it. More ships continued arriving from all directions. Kehoe watched the tactical display as his fleet took formation. Each captain reported ready for battle, awaiting orders from their new human admiral. They had questions about his identity, but their duty was clear. The rebel commander opened communications, attempting to negotiate. Admiral Kehoe, this is General Vex of the Liberation Front. You are harboring enemies of the Altarian people. Surrender Princess Nara and her spawn, and we will allow your fleet to withdraw. Kehoe response was broadcast across the entire system. General Vex, this is Admiral Kehoe of the Third Fleet. The only enemies I see are the ones who murder families and terrorize children. Your revolution ends here. The battle began with a fury that shook the stars. Rebel ships attacked from multiple vectors, trying to overwhelm the defensive formation. But Kehoe had studied their tactics through the ship computer. He understood how they fought and how they could be beaten. He combined human unpredictability with Altarian technology in ways that confused the enemy. Kehoe ordered his ships to use hit-and-run tactics that no Altarian commander had ever attempted. The rebels found themselves fighting an opponent who broke all their expectations. Human creativity merged with alien engineering created devastating new strategies. Kehoe modified weapon systems during the battle, improving their effectiveness in real time. His engineering background helped him understand ship capabilities that trained military officers had never considered. The tide turned when Kehoe ordered a desperate gambit. He commanded his flagship to ram through the rebel battle line while other ships provided covering fire. It was a move that should have been suicide, but Kehoe had calculated the exact moment when rebel shields would be weakest. The maneuver worked perfectly. The rebel flagship was crippled and 2 escort vessels were destroyed. The remaining enemy ships began to retreat, but Kehoe was not finished. He had learned that these rebels had attacked other worlds, slaughtering civilians who could not defend themselves. Pursue and capture. He ordered no rebel ship leaves this system. Justice will be served for every innocent life they have taken within 3 hours. The battle was over. Every rebel vessel was either destroyed or captured. General Vex himself was brought aboard the flagship in chains. He stared at Kehoe with hatred and disbelief that a human had defeated him so completely. News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. The human admiral who had risen from nowhere to command the Third Fleet became an instant legend. Stories were told of his brilliance in battle and his compassion for the innocent. More importantly, other Altarian commanders began requesting to serve under him. They had heard how he treated his crew with respect and fairness, how he shared dangers with his subordinates. Instead of hiding in safety, his reputation for integrity grew with every mission. Kehoe established his headquarters on Titan 7, transforming the small mining colony into a major military base. The underground tunnels were expanded into command centers, and the surface became home to the most advanced shipyards in human space. He never Forgot his origins, the old repair shop where it all began was preserved exactly as it had been. His original tools still sat on the workbench, reminding everyone that greatness could come from the humblest circumstances. Princess Nara remained at his side, serving as liaison between the human admiral and the Altarian government. Bin and Hannah grew up calling him Uncle Kehoe and often helped in the workshops, learning the mechanical skills that had started this incredible journey. The Third Fleet became known throughout the galaxy not for conquest but for protection. Kehoe used his ships to escort refugee convoys, hunt down pirates, and defend peaceful worlds from aggressive neighbors. His fleet was a force for justice rather than domination. Other human colonies began requesting Altarian protection. Word of Admiral Kehoe kindness and effectiveness spreading through human space. The dream of true alliance between species was finally becoming reality through the example of one-man choices, but Kehoe remained humble despite his incredible rise to power. When reporters called him a hero, he insisted he was just a mechanic who had been in the right place at the right time. When politicians praised his genius, he credited his crew and the Altarian technology. The rebels never stopped trying to kill him. They sent assassins and saboteurs, planted bombs, and spread lies about his motives. But Kehoe's simple honesty and consistent actions won more allies than any propaganda could counter. Within 2 years, Admiral Kehoe commanded respect from dozens of species. His fleet had grown to include ships from many worlds, all united under his banner of protection and justice. The galaxy was becoming a safer place because one man had chosen kindness over selfishness. He often stood in his old workshop late at night working on simple repairs with his original tools. It reminded him that no matter how far he had risen, his greatest achievement remained that first moment when he chose to help strangers in need. 5 years had passed since the night Nara crashed into Kehoe's small world. The mining colony of Titan 7 was now the capital of a new kind of empire, one built on friendship instead of fear, cooperation instead of conquest. The transformation was so complete that visitors could hardly believe this had once been a forgotten outpost. Admiral Kehoe stood in his command center watching the morning briefing displays. Dozens of worlds now flew under his protection banner. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together on joint projects. The galaxy had never seen such widespread peace and prosperity. His fleet had grown beyond all expectations. Over 200 battleships from a dozen different species served under his command, but more importantly, he had created something that had never existed before. A truly integrated military force where humans worked alongside aliens as equals. The key to his success was simple. Kehoe treated everyone with the same respect he had shown to a desperate mother and her children on that first night. He listened to ideas from junior officers, promoted based on merit rather than politics, and shared both dangers and rewards with his crew. Nara entered the command center carrying official documents from the Altarian homeworld. She had been crowned Empress the previous year, but chose to remain on Titan 7 as Kehoe partner in building this new galactic alliance. Her children, Bin and Hannah, were now teenagers who split their time between royal duties and working in the engineering sections. Uncle Kehoe, Hannah, as she ran into the room. I finished the modifications to the quantum drive systems. The efficiency is up 12% and the power consumption is down 8%. Kehoe smiled and hugged the girl who had become like a daughter to him. She had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's courage, but also gained something else from her years on Titan 7. She understood that the best technology was useless without wisdom and compassion to guide it. Ben appeared a few minutes later, covered in grease from working on a new prototype fighter. He had grown tall and strong, but still had the same gentle nature that had made Kehoe love him from the beginning. The boy who had once been terrified of a strange human now commanded respect from veteran pilots twice his age. The morning reports showed the continuing success of Kehoe policies. Trade between worlds had increased 500%. Since the alliance began, scientific cooperation had led to breakthroughs in medicine, energy production, and space travel. Most importantly, there had been no major wars in over 3 years, but the greatest achievement was harder to measure in statistics. Kehoe had proven that leadership based on kindness was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. His example had inspired millions of beings across the galaxy to choose cooperation over conflict. The Titan 7 Academy had become the most prestigious Military school and known space officers from hundreds of worlds came to study not just tactics and technology, but the principles that made Kehoe forces so effective. Honor, integrity, compassion, and courage were not just words but the foundation of everything they did. Students learned that true strength came from protecting the weak, not exploiting them, that real victory meant making enemies into friends, rather than simply defeating them, that the measure of a leader was not how much power they accumulated, but how much they lifted up. Thursky Ho often taught classes, himself sharing the lessons he had learned in his journey from mechanic to admiral. He would start each lecture the same way, by showing pictures of his old repair shop and telling the story of the night everything changed. He would explain to the cadets that heroism was not about grand gestures or dramatic battles. It was about the small choices made every day, the decision to help instead of ignore, to give instead of take, to include instead of exclude. These moments shaped the character that would be tested when real crises came. The rebel movement that had once threatened the galaxy was now completely defeated. Most of the former rebels had joined Kehoe forces. After seeing how he treated prisoners with dignity and offered them chances to redeem themselves, General Vex himself now served as an instructor at the academy, teaching young officers about the mistakes that had led him down the wrong path. But Kehoe never allowed himself to become comfortable with success. He remembered too well the loneliness and struggle of his early life. He made sure that his government reached out to forgotten places like Titan 7 had once been small colonies received protection, and aid struggling communities got the help they needed to thrive. Every month, Kehoe would take a small ship and visit remote outposts personally. He would talk to mechanics and miners, farmers and shopkeepers, listening to their problems and finding ways to help. He never forgot that true leadership meant serving others, not being served by them. The old repair shop was now a museum, but Kehoe still went there every evening. He would work on simple projects with his original tools. It kept him connected to the person he had been before power and responsibility changed his life. The grease stains on his hands reminded him that honest work was still the foundation of everything good. Visitors to the museum would often find the famous admiral bent over a broken motor or welding torn metal. They were surprised to see the most powerful man in the galaxy doing such humble work. But Kehoe would smile and explain that every machine deserved to be fixed properly regardless of its importance. Nara would sometimes join him in the old workshop, working alongside the man who had saved her family and changed the galaxy. They rarely talked during these sessions, but the comfortable silence spoke of years of partnership and mutual respect. She had learned to appreciate the simple satisfaction of creating and repairing things with her own hands. The children of Titan 7 grew up hearing the story of Admiral Kehoe and the crashed spaceship. They learned that anyone could make a difference if they chose kindness over selfishness, courage over fear, hope over despair. The legend inspired a new generation to believe in the power of doing what was right. As Kehoe stood in his command center, surrounded by beings from dozens of worlds, all working together for the common good, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him here. It had started with the simple decision to help strangers in need. Everything else had grown from that single moment of compassion. He thought about all the lives that had been saved, the wars that had been prevented, the friendships that had been forged across species barriers. The galaxy was a better place because one night a struggling mechanic had chosen to share his last meal with hungry children. The greatest victory was not any battle he had won or any fleet he commanded. It was the knowledge that his example had inspired countless others to choose kindness in their own lives. The legacy would continue long after he was gone, carried forward by everyone who believed that love was stronger than hate. Kehoe picked up a wrench from his old toolbox and smiled. It was still the same tool that had helped him fix that first alien ship, the tool that had started the chain of events that changed everything. He hoped that somewhere in the galaxy another person was making the choice to help a stranger in need. The stars outside his window seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself approved of what he had built through simple human decency.